there are a lot of contenders for King of the South. So who would you say is King of the South?
I think hip hop will always be a voice for the people.
Hey everybody, I'm Reggie Williams, founder and CEO of Ambrosia for Heads, and with me I have Jake Payne, our editor-in-chief.
What's
How
going
you
on?
doing, man?
Man, I can't complain. Beautiful, gray Sunday morning here in Philadelphia. How about you?
Yeah, it's only been 2 weeks, man, but it feels like forever. Like, are you still like, does time just seem like just a foreign concept at this point to you?
Yo, it is insane right now. Just, yeah. I mean, 2020 is like a blur. And now that the summer's over and the sunlight ends sooner, it's so bizarre. Like everyone I know is just tripping out right now.
Yeah, yeah. How's it in Philly? Like, are you guys got a nice like outdoor scene for restaurants and stuff like that, or what's going on?
Yeah, and they closed a lot of the streets down, I think, like they did in New York. It's cool, but everyone's outside. Like actually both Friday and Saturday night, I kept it kind of simple and relatively indoors because in the city, everyone is just going stir crazy and trying to get the good weather while they can.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful weekend here. So I got no complaints, man.
Good.
Happy to be alive. COVID is still absolutely, something that is plaguing us all. And
Yeah.
numbers going up across the country. We all know what happened with the president over the last week. I'm seeing now that Dr. Fauci is calling it a super spreader event, like in the White House, which is
Hmm.
pretty crazy. But something that hits much more close to home for us in hip hop is Scarface. He contracted the virus. I know early on. I can't remember if it was March or April, but it was very
Hmm.
early on in the cycle, and it hit him very hard. Unbeknownst to people, he was like hospitalized for several days and in very, very severe condition.
Dialysis. Yeah.
Yeah, he had pneumonia first. His lungs were filled with fluid, and then his kidneys failed. And now he is in desperate need of a kidney. And he tweeted out over the last couple of days that he was looking for a donor. Um, so Ti apparently has said that he is willing to pay money for this. But what are your thoughts on this, man? Like Scarface, obviously, like has had health problems over the years, but
Yeah.
this seems to be like even more severe, after the loss of Bushwick Bill. It's
Yeah.
definitely
I
something
mean,
that's tough to
it's
hear.
it's just a wake up call. I mean, right now, from what I understand, Bismarcky is still, going through what he's going through, and details are thin. But I know he's in serious health condition, and now to know that Face is still, very much suffering in 2020, that's an alarm. And pick an icon. We've lost so many, hip hop legends and important figures due to health reasons. And to have the opportunity to do something now, it's very important that we start this discussion there. And Scarface, I mean, he is the king underdog, and yeah, I want him to be here for a long time and continue to get his flowers while he is.
Yeah, and very much in another chapter, a subsequent chapter. I won't say second because he's had many chapters, but another chapter in life with, going into politics, running for mayor in Houston, and or
City
city council,
councilman. Yeah.
city councilman in Houston, and really just being a positive impact on the community. Definitely wish him well. Apparently, he's looking for people who have AB blood type. I guess that's the best possible match for him. But I just read another tweet saying that it didn't matter. You could be whatever as long as it was a good fit. That they would match his blood type. I don't know the science behind it, but it sounds like it's not limited just to people with AB blood type.
Yeah, I mean, and Scarface, you and I with Ambrosia, we spent a lot of time talking about health, really driving home the issues of, what are the dangers that face people of a certain age, dangers that face Black people specifically. And, Scarface is one of those examples of, in the last 10 years, he dropped, I think, over 100 pounds of weight, stopped smoking cigarettes from what I understand, probably chilled a little bit on, alcohol. And I mean, Scarface is a public figure, but he's not covered, like maybe even Action Bronson losing his weight is, because he's just, a little bit deliberately low profile. But I would hate to see, after so much investment and positivity going on in Brad Jordan's life, something tragic to happen. And I salute Ti, because I think, and a lot of people would agree, you know, Scarface's generation, those late 80s, early 90s artists from the South, they really blazed the trail so that guys like T.I. and Jeezy and Ludacris and on and on and on could be who they became. And let's not forget either that, you know, T.I. kind of came into the game in the early 2000s and called himself the King of the South, which was blasphemous to a lot of people, you know, at the time. And Scarface stood by it, you know, at a time when Tip and Little Flip, who's also from Scarface's, you know, native Houston, were going at it, and Face co-signed T.I. And to see all these years later when it's maybe not as convenient for T.I. to, you know, be out on the front lines and saying, look, if money's the issue, I'll make it happen. So, you know, I applaud Tip for that.
Yeah, you know, I was watching Real Time with Bill Maher and this week, and he had a guest on it, and they were talking about obesity, you know, and the fact is that obesity kills 40,000 people a month in this country, which is something that's just not discussed. I mean, and obviously it is one of the pre-existing conditions that compounds COVID, you know. So, you know, I think that as we, you know, look at, you know, things like masks and other, you know, fixes, like that is something we absolutely have to address as a long-term fix, you know, because it's clearly one of the things that makes us more susceptible to it.
Big facts. And you know, over the last week, I laughed because, you know, the president is renowned for his vanity, but one of the things they said when he contracted COVID is not only is this guy in his upper 70s, Donald Trump is obese, like, you know, scientifically or you know, by the charts obese, which makes him, you know, which makes, no matter how lightly he takes COVID, it makes it a more serious issue. So yeah, look no further than the White House for case in point of what you're saying.
Yeah, and you're right. Like Face should be celebrated. I remember like 4 or 5 years ago, it was like striking, like how much weight he'd lost, and
Yeah.
you know, I'd wondered if he was healthy at the time, but it actually was, you know, truly being healthy that helped him get there, which is pretty amazing. You know, I just like kind of got back my workout equipment and stuff like that in the last like week or so, and finally kind of feeling like myself. I went through like a 6, 7 week period where I couldn't work out like I wanted to. And it impacts everything, man. Like you feel different, you feel sluggish. You know, you're not as mentally sharp. It's a natural antidepressant. It's a lot of different things, man. So critical
Yeah,
to get that workout in.
most definitely.
How's your fitness been?
Man, you know, it's crazy. 2020, I've worked out more than I have in, I might even say 15 years, you know, and I had a friend move back into Philly, and, you know, for the last 3 months, we've been doing, you know, cardio and calisthenics outside. And, you know, just recently they opened up the gym. And so now that I'm not seeing my, you know, folks or you know, folks that could be potentially easy threatened, you know what I mean? I've been over for now 3 weeks back in the gym, and yeah, I mean, you know, the results are TBD, but I feel sharper, and it's one of the things that's allowed me to kind of cope with all of the, you know, general claustrophobia, depression, all of these things that are 2020. So I totally agree with you. And, you know, it's one of the things that I'll take as an upside out of this year is it was motivation for reasons even we just said of like, yo, you got to take ownership.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll always be the silver lining of this year, one of them.
Word. So you mentioned T.I. claiming himself to be the king of the South back in the day, and now coming to support someone that many would call the king of the South. I think there are a lot of contenders for that. You know, Big Critters called himself king of the South. Lil Wayne, you know, even though it's interesting because, you know, even though it's from New Orleans, people don't necessarily think of him as a Southern rapper. He's kind of transcended that, in my opinion. You know, Rick Ross, like, there are a lot of contenders for King of the South. So who would you say is King of the South? Let's go with right now and then all time.
Yeah, I mean, right now for me, and this is more probably subjective than objective, but I give it to Crit. You know, I mean, just what he's done through this decade, you know, since Crit was here in 2010 to here we are 2020, great mixtapes, great albums, meaningful, you know, verses, all of that. All time, you know, Face is definitely right there. But one of the things I'll say as a caveat to that, neither Big Boy nor Andre 3000 ever really went for that. You know what I mean? And to me, I've been listening to a lot of Big Boy this week. Even that song to the video you and I kind of condemned a bit on this podcast. Girls Keep Calling Me, Up All Night. But any of those three I'll accept. Those to me are the three kings, if I can, be diplomatic, of the South. Dre, Big, and Face.
Dre, Big, and Face.
Yeah.
Okay, you wouldn't put Tip in that all time.
No, but I mean, again, like I say, last 10 years I'll give it to Crit. But in the first 2000 to 2010, T.I. all day. I mean, King to me for the longest was the last great 5 mic album. I'm handing out the mics. Like King was that album. So I'm a huge fan of T.I., but I just don't know that his emphasis is on music as much. I mean, he's doing things like this with Face and, political stuff and podcast stuff. But yeah, what about you though?
So current King of the South, for me, is J. Cole. People forget, I mean, Cole has got that East Coast flow and he's affiliated with Rock Nation and everything, but he's North Carolina, born and bred, still lives there, shouts it out, Fayetteville, extremely proud of it. By far, the most commercial success right now and has had longevity and has been around like 12 years almost now. I know the warm-up was like 2009. And so, like 2009. And so, he's been, a couple mixtapes before that too, but so longevity, commercial success, just straight lyricism, relevancy, all that. J. Cole is the king of the South right now for me.
That's a good point. And people don't realize that. And even when you say North Carolina, like, we'd be remiss even in that last 10 years discussion. What about Fonte? Because especially like Fonte makes music that is distinctly Southern, like, his dialect, his references, his humor, and not unlike Face. I mean, Face is a gangster rapper and came into the game, on some D-boy narratives, but he raps a lot about what's going on in his head and in his family. That's Tigolo. So, you make a great case. I'm not mad at any of these, and absolutely like what Cool has done over these last 10 years. Yeah, that's between Crit, Cool, Fonte.
Yeah, I mean Fonte. Yeah, you're right. He doesn't get enough props for that, but he is. I mean, master lyricist. And for all time for me, I got to go with Three Stacks, man. André 3000.
Yeah.
Just because we've had this conversation before, but when it comes to GOAT conversations, I think a lot of people in groups get shortchanged. Black Thought, Fonte,
Posthumous.
Yeah, exactly. And André 3000 definitely falls into that category. I think he is a top 5 MC, period, like hands down. And so like if he's a top 5 MC and he's the one from the South that I would put in there, then I got to give him King of the South all the time.
Yeah, man. And Big Boy might be Scottie Pippen in that though. Like, it's crazy. Right. I mean, just again, like, in the last, I mean, if we really kind of take Dre off the table after 2008, 2007, when he went on that feature run, I mean, what Big Boy does on his own is really remarkable. And I know the music might not get the attention that it deserves, but even songs he's made this year, I'm just, flabbergasted. I'm like, man, this guy's had it for 25 years and counting.
Yeah, so let's go with that for a second. Let's go with, MCs that are considered, the B player, and I'm not saying that in a way that I agree with it. I'm saying that people consider one to be kind of the lead MC and the other one to kind of be the supporting MC, right? Now let's think about those. Who are the best ones, and where's the argument that they're actually, if not equal, maybe even the lead? I'm gonna give you one straight off the bat.
Yeah.
That I always get. I actually had a debate with Ninth Wonder and I think Young Guru with this at the time. For me, Phife Dawg is at the top of that heap.
Yeah.
Because, Q-Tip's voice is amazing, his cadence is crazy, but when it comes to pure like rhymes and even voice and everything too, and wit and punchlines, man, all the lines I remember from Tribe are like from Phife, especially from Low End Theory and Midnight Marauders. Like Phife Dawg just smashed both those albums.
He killed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a good one too. Because I mean, you know, the Ventilation LP, his kind of debut, despite Dilla and High Tech and I think Pete Rock, you know, it never shined like Tip did on his own, Q-Tip.
Yeah. Havoc is another one.
What'd you say?
Havoc is another one.
Yeah, and it's funny. I keep thinking of Hav too because you know, Hav's verse on the new Conway album, that Juvenile Hell song, that was my song of the week, you know, last week. Hav is as nice as Banks, he's as nice as Conway on that, and he produced the beat. So that's dope. I'm gonna hit you with one, Inspector Deck.
Okay.
Because I mean, people in the Wu fans always go Ghost, Ray, Meth, ODB, Jizza. Like, you know, I think You God, Master Killer, Inspector Deck kind of get forgotten, and then RZA, everyone wants to talk about the production. If you look at the Wu albums themselves, you know, especially during the, you know, heralded run of the 90s, Deck, I honestly believe on Wu albums has the best verses. Like, you know, the stuff we love and remember, especially on Wu-Tang Forever and Enter the Wu-Tang. And I know his solo career hasn't measured up, you know, Uncontrolled Substance, The Flood, all this stuff. And it's dope to see him win in Scarface. But man, Deck, MC Ren, you know, especially on the second NWA album, Ren killed that, but people want to talk about Cube Forever and then, you know, easy with it.
Yeah.
Dave from De La Soul, you know, True Joy, kills it every time.
Eric Sermon.
You think E-Dub lyrically and EPMD? I mean, I'm asking you because you lived through it more than I did in the 80s, but you think that people gave PMD the more attention?
I do. Only because, you know, we have a hard time like giving people props in two categories a lot of times, you know, and Eric Sermon was seen as the producer, you know, the music guy. And I think that's why Havoc gets shortchanged too.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times when you're that, people try to categorize and say, okay, this guy does the music, this guy's the lead rhymer.
Yeah.
But, you know, Parrish, I do think was considered that way. I would say, you know, it's interesting because another kind of like flip flop that happened like with Q-Tip versus Fife for me with Tribe was similar with Run DMC, because people viewed Run as kind of like the lead MC. He came out, he opened up the show, he had the much more bombastic,
a lot of the first verses,
you know, style and like, you know, and aggressiveness. But DMC, like, I mean, you know, when King of Rock, he opened that, right? I'm the King of Rock, you know, and through that album into Raising Hell was when DMC ascended, and like, you know, and he had ill verses on the first album too, but by the time Raising Hell hit, like from the mountain valley to the deep blue sea, the word is heard is told by D. I don't sing, I'll bring much to light, you know, like the stars shining bright in the darkest night. Like he was just crazy, man. There are quite a few like that. Like who else?
Willie D. I mean, when we talk about Face, Willie D's solo catalog leaves a lot to be desired. And Willie's a friend of mine for over the years, but the role that he played in his time in Ghetto Boys is really incredible. And considering he and Face wrote a lot of Bill's verses, you know, Willie D just has that voice and that conviction that I just love, and it made that group so menacing and dope.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. So out of all those, is there one who you give the nod to?
I mean, I've been on this. I've been dying on this Inspector Deck hill for years. You know, I like that, and I also do like yours, Fife. But I feel like, and it's sad, but as we talk about flowers, well, you can still smell them. I feel like the 25th anniversary of Low End Theory, which we had some great content on. Shout out to you and Amanda. And Fife's passing, people reconsidered Fife. I want people to go back, listen to those two Wu albums, and Rebel INS is woof, you know, with that voice, you know.
Yeah. I will definitely go back and check those out.
You're going Fife?
I'm going Fife, but I'm starting to think of like current players too. Like, you know, I think about TDE, and you know, Kendrick was clearly the one now that has like, you know, ascended to the top in terms of like commercial and critical acclaim. But I think about like J-Rock, and obviously, you know, he's the one who kicked things off, and over the last 3 years, like I don't know that there's an artist on TDE who's had a better run than J Rock.
Yeah.
Between his album with Win and guest verses, like even on the Problem album, we talked about he killed
Yeah.
that. Anderson .Paak's Lockdown. He's been on 2 straight BET Awards. I don't know if you realize that. He opened up the BET Awards of 2019, I believe it was,
Mm-hmm.
and then 2020, with Anderson .Paak. So Rock is ill. So I'd put him up there. And other current artists, any current artists you could think of?
I mean, Griselda does a really good job. I said it in our interview with the Locks a few weeks ago, but I have to say on this new Locks album, Chic stole the show.
Yeah.
I and no one says it. I actually wanted to ask the guys, and I neglected to. There's so many times when they're doing features and it's just Styles and Kiss, and that's such a snub to Chic. And I'm like, yo, he has some of my favorite verses on the whole album. So,
do you think there is a lead MC in Griselda?
I think Gunn would immediately say it's Conway or Benny. I think he would take himself out of that equation. But once you get down to Benny or Conway, I think they are like, John Stockton and Karl Malone. Like they're both like right there.
Yeah, right there. I mean, right there. Like Conway's my guy. I just love his voice and his cadence. But Benny is just he's a monster, man. He is just a monster, and his grind. His rise has just been like that for the last 2-3 years now,
Yeah.
So, all right. So, and it's interesting that neither one of us named Lil Wayne as like the ultimate king of the South, given that he has by far had the most commercial success out of anyone. Why do you think that is?
That's a really good question. Maybe it's for the reason that you said. I mean, Wayne, in what, 2005, 2006, he went beyond that in his own proclamations. He said best rapper alive, and I feel like Wayne just went universal, and meanwhile, all of the artists that we're mentioning made music that lets you know at all times they were from the South. And I feel like after a certain point, Wayne didn't do that. Now, there's people out there that listen to Wayne a lot more than I do and probably know the catalog better than you or I do, who might say otherwise. But that's my perception. Wayne transcended the South, whether you agree he was the king or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, so speaking of Benny and Lil Wayne, Benny released a song this week. It's his first song, to my knowledge, with, artists of his own song with an artist of this stature. But he had a song with Lil Wayne and Big Sean, and the record is called Timeless. I'm curious to see the reaction because I wonder if people are thinking that this might be his foray into becoming more commercial and more mainstream. The beat itself was very much, I think, in line with Benny's beats. No in any way compromise or attempt to be on the radio, but it's definitely with stars who are ushering in that path toward, kind of top 40 radio. But what was your thought about the record in general?
So I did hear the production, which is by Hit Boy. I mean, they have an album coming together, which we've discussed a bit. It didn't to me sound like the Derringer, Alchemist, Beat Butcher, Chamber at all. But that being said, I mean, it didn't chase radio at all.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest with you, when I first heard the record, I didn't like it. I was just like, damn, and that might be me jerking the steering wheel of saying, damn, I don't want to watch this artist that I really have admired in organic growth go in this direction. You put it on the playlist, and I kind of rolled my eyes at it, and I was like, "Oh man!" Like I feel like
force you into liking another one.
But it's funny. I woke up this morning. I'm going through all the new music this week. Listened to it 3 more times, and I'm like, "Damn! I actually really like this record." And I like even what Wayne and Sean add to it. It's not, make no mistake, this is not Benny and Black Thought or Benny and Pusha T, on the Plugs I Met last year, but it shows range. And there's something on the record that Sean said where I'm like, yo, this is crazy that Sean would go to a place like Benny to say something so meaningful and topical.
Yeah, so before we get to that, like, it's interesting to me because Benny is not one that or anyone on Griselda, you and I have talked about this extensively, that I ever thought would move toward that commercial lane. I always assumed that they were going to force the commercial
Come to
to
them.
come to them, and like a Kendrick, Kendrick has never ever kind of gone, commercial, like, maybe like Backseat Freestyle, maybe like the biggest, or like,
Well, he did. I mean, he did do that. So, like, what was he on? It was and excuse my ignorance, it was a Taylor Swift remix. Like, there was
Bad Blood, right? Is it Bad
yeah,
Blood? Yeah,
exactly. But at the same time, like, he came out of it scot free. But there was a period of time where, especially, like, he did the joint with Alicia Keys,
and
you
Maroon
know,
5, but
yeah,
I mean
Imagine Dragons,
his own music, like his
yeah,
own music, like,
true, true.
he's never like that. He's done guest appearances and everything. I don't really count that, but his own music has stayed very core to who he is and has not chased. I guess you could argue that the Mike Will stuff did, but like to me, like Damn is Kendrick's Purple Rain moment. So Purple Rain, Prince Supreme artist, incredibly dense, and had commercial success for sure, but not like a Michael Jackson, because he wasn't making like records like, When Doves Cry didn't have a bass line. It was not a
Mhm.
conventional commercial record. Like, so in a lot of ways, Prince forced people to come to him. And there was one moment, which was Purple Rain, where the two kind of intersected perfectly, the zeitgeist and his artistry. To me, Damn is that, in that, it was critically acclaimed. He has Mike Will made it on it, who's obviously had tremendous commercial success, but you know, DNA is not a conventional record by any
No.
stretch. Humble is not really either. It's a weird kind of like discordant record. So um, I, I think Kendrick is an example of someone who has not done that yet. This record seems to me like Benny could be going there, but to me it does still feel like Benny, and it doesn't feel like, I think the biggest kind of shock for me was when I remember when Wiz went from Cushion OJ to Black and Yellow.
Yeah.
That to me was a radical departure. And Big Sean, like, what is the record with Chris Brown that sampled No Audition, My Love, or
Yeah.
my own, I can't remember, too many titles these days, but those were kind of jarring to me.
Yeah.
This was not a jarring record from Benny for me. It was definitely a progression, but wasn't jarring. You found it jarring though.
At first, I like it now. I'm curious to see what Benny does, and I'm curious to see if it works. But I think you and I both agree that we want, and I think it's true of not just Benny, but Conway and Gunn. And Gunn is so deliberate with it, like, no, come into our world. And I hope that happens, but at the same time, Benny is so prolific that why not make this Hit Boy project stand out? Why not make it its own thing in a very busy discography? So I'm eager to see. And yeah, I did not like the joint at first. I came back and I listened 3-4 more times, and I'm warming up to it. I really am. And I love what Benny says on it too, because that's the thing too. The beat might be so-and-so, the guests might be who they are, but Benny talks about going on tour with the Locks, which I think was 2017. My cousin went to it in Philly, and having an address in the projects. Like, it is very much a started from the bottom narrative on the record, which is that's what I want to hear Benny give the world when they tune into him, because of a Wayne or because of a Sean.
Which is dope, because now we know we have that Griselda and Locks collabo. We got to talk to the Locks about that. In our
Think of the Locks, one of my
a
songs
couple
of
weeks
the
ago,
year,
which is amazing. So definitely go back and check that out. But so you mentioned Big Sean and had some substantive stuff to say on his verse. Can you break that down?
Yeah, I mean, so he bats third, and I think no more than 16 bars from him or Wayne, I don't think. But Sean comes on the song and alludes to a bum deal, or, to use his terms, a slave deal. And you look at Sean's career, and he's really only been signed one place, and your shirt matches it. Good music.
Actually, my shirt is
good kid.
Kendrick there.
At first, I was on the font, and I was like, "Yo," but he also makes reference to one specific person. He says the N-word, right? And so thus it's Kanye. I don't think he's calling the chairman of the board at Def Jam that. So and a time when Kanye has gone on Twitter and said he would do all these things for his artists and really challenge the history of contracts in the music industry and specifically in hip hop. Sean's like, not so fast, because you robbed me, so to speak.
Yeah. So what do you think? So Charlemagne, the guy that actually kind of like given a sneak peek of this a week or so ago, I'm sure I suspect he'd heard the record because he had said that in response to Kanye's kind of rants over the last month or so against the record industry and wanting to get his masters back and how unfair the deals are and everything like that, Charlemagne accused him of hypocrisy given the deal that he'd given his artists, and specifically cited Big Sean, said that he owed Big Sean a lot of money, and that Sean had shown tremendous restraint and that he hoped that his story could come out. And then a week later, his story comes out. So, I don't think that's coincidence.
No.
What do you why do you think he chose Benny's record to do this?
It's so interesting. So often artists use their controversial statements to their own benefit. And I look at Sean, of all people, who I don't know if Sean benefited at all from the Control, verse, but in history of like, artists saying crazy things on somebody else's song, in recent history, look no further than that, in 2013. And this is Benny. I don't know that, like, unlike Kendrick on Sean, everyone's tuning in. There's a lot of folks out there that know who Sean is that probably don't know who Benny is. Maybe this was the way he could get it out faster because, Detroit 2 came out, was finished before Kanye went on this thing. So maybe this was just like, let me get it to the people, and I'm not going to do it in a tweet. I'm going to do it in a 16. And it also happens amid an election where a lot of people say that, Kanye's name is showing up on California ballots and other places. Like, it's his way of saying, F this dude.
That happens a lot, like where artists will use their guest verses to address controversial things. It happened a lot with Nicki and Remy Ma when they were in their feud. Drake and Budden, kicked off that way. Drake actually uses a lot of features for subliminals like that. Jay-Z does it quite a bit too. It's really interesting, and the timeliness of the cycle is a good one. I hadn't thought about that. Maybe because if you're in album mode, you might be working on an album for a year or two. But you need to just get something out quick. That makes sense that you do it in a guest verse.
Also, too, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Detroit 2, Sean's new mixtape sequel album, but it's cohesive. Like, he had thematic intent. Where if he put that, first of all, our Ambrosia for Heads Facebook share was one of the only places I saw that brought attention to what Sean said. I think Friday was such a busy music day that a lot of people missed it. But I feel like if he would have put that on the album and everyone combs through the album looking for talking points, that would have, outweighed his issues of talking about depression or his relationship with Janae Aiko or whatever else. It didn't necessarily belong on the album. But I like that. I think that's a cool thing that, and you're absolutely right. Like, Jay did it, he addressed the Dame situation on the, Diamonds Are Forever remix and different places that make records like that exciting. So it's all the more reason to check out the record. And like, I'm curious to see what others think. But for me, the more I listen to it, the more I like it.
Yeah. One of the things that Sean talks about is his masters, and having a slave contract and someone else having his masters. And Kanye has said that he would give back his share of his masters that he owns, which is I think 50%. What do you think about that? So copyrights now, lyrics, which are covered in publishing, typically. Now artists are savvy enough to retain their publishing, and often they'll sign a deal with a major music publisher, which typically is an affiliated company with the major record companies. So like there'll be Universal, Music Group and
Warner Chappell,
have a
Chapel
label, and then but they'll have Universal Music Publishing too.
Right.
So they'll have both arms. But even if artists do a different deal for their publishing, it still gives them a separate revenue stream apart from their recording revenue. But it's an interesting concept. If someone creates art, it works differently in different industries. So if you were a writer for a magazine, often you'll be on staff, but a lot of people are contributing writers and they actually own the IP, and if they don't own the copyright to the article, they'll still retain the rights to any kind of derivative work like a TV show or film or podcast or anything like that. Do you think we've reached a time where artists should de facto retain ownership of their product and, obviously give a perpetual license to the person that's funding it, but retain some stake in it? Or do you think that if you've been paid for it, you should the record company should own it?
Oh, you mean go retroactively?
Well, not retroactively because that's going to be difficult. But do you
Yeah.
think going forward that should kind of become a new standard?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's become the standard, and it's funny. I mean, I talk to on the, in my freelance career, I do a lot of press bios and I consult a lot with these young artists of all different, popularities. And it's funny, I'll ask them why they partnered with XYZ record company or distributor. And it's so interesting. It doesn't seem like it's about the bag anymore. It really seems about, ownership, like let me hold my own thing, creative control. And then what resources are you doing for me? Like, what is your staff doing? Can you help me get into these new buildings, licensing deals to video games? Do you have a relationship with, XYZ DSP so I can make the homepage when I drop? That's what people want versus 10 years ago. Every artist seemed like they were in a bidding war, So yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, we're seeing that in the conversation, whether it's a situation like this or it's LL Cool J going on Sway and saying, oh yeah, by the way, I negotiated with Def Jam a few years ago. I own all my masters, which is really dope. Like, how often do we hear about that? Or Jay-Z going back and getting Reasonable Doubt, because that was his baby. I love to see that. And I think that'll be the standard from here on out.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about it being about more than money now, about being creative control and ownership. So a rumor surfaced earlier in the week, it's a nice segue, that gained traction, and it was a dominant news cycle for about 24 hours. It was that Kendrick Lamar had left TDE and had gone to PG Lang to join forces with his manager and, childhood friend and business partner, Dave Free. The label, it's a company that is multimedia. It's music, it's film, it's TV. They have an artist, Baby Keem, who's Kendrick's cousin. Kendrick participated in the trailer announcing the venture some time ago after Dave left TDE, months ago. And so the rumor had a lot of credibility because of all those factors, the fact that, Kendrick and Dave have such a close alliance, the Baby Keem relationship, but also, to your point, artists wanting creative control and ownership of their own product. Now, you and I know, and I'm not sure if everyone knows, but based on the Billboard article interview with TDE from a few years ago, that Kendrick is actually a stakeholder in TDE. I don't know what percentage that is. And certainly it's probably not the same as a percentage that he would have in his own company if he formed it. But it gained a lot of traction. Do you think? But 24 hours later, Kendrick came on in a really funny kind of video, pointed at a Blue's Clues stuffed animal, just like debunking it and like talking about people putting rumors on his name and sweating his name and stuff like that. Why do you think a rumor like that gained traction?
It, for reasons you said. I mean, it's plausible, and honestly, what you just said in the last 2 minutes is better and creates more logic than any article I read online this week. But I just missed it when I read it because I just TDE moves differently than any label of that magnitude, and those guys have been in the trenches together not only 20 years ago but more recently, and I highly doubt that there's a lot of creative control that isn't 100% Kendrick's coming out of that. Top or Punch or somebody else might say, hey, this should be the single versus that. But I can't imagine a TDE where Kendrick isn't in it. And I feel like that label gives him license to help out his homies, Dave Free, anyone else. But yeah, I don't see that. I would be willing to bet the ranch that Kendrick's musical career plays out with the same folks that he came in with.
Yeah, it's You're right. Like TDE is a family. I mean, they're a very tight knit bond, and those dudes literally lived in the studio together and on tour buses together for years.
Yeah.
That was a bond forged in blood, sweat, and tears. That said, like, people do choose to go on and do their own separate things. Dave obviously left to do his own thing, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that leaving necessarily means beef. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Sometimes people just need to do something different, have their own thing. Drake like has kind of outgrown like Young
Cash
Money,
Money.
and
Yeah.
OVO is a something that makes sense for him. So while this might not true, you could easily see something like that happening. I could see them continuing to be partners in some way too. It doesn't all have to be the way that some splits have gone, like with Dre and like and others. So um, but I want to talk about how you and I would have covered that, if the site were still up, because you and I had debates a lot of times when something dropped that wasn't fully confirmed. We
Yeah.
were very methodical, and I would say erring toward the side of conservative.
Hmm.
Me typically being the one to push it, because like if it was like substantiated by a credible source, or if it was someone saying it. There's a lot of times where we would go back and forth if there was someone in the space saying something about themselves,
Yeah.
but we didn't necessarily believe that person to be credible.
Right.
And my point was, okay, even if they're lying, they're still saying it, so we should run with it. And your point was, yeah, but should we go with it if we
Yeah.
don't think it's true? Now, in this case, it's different because it was third-party rumor.
Yeah.
But how would you have approached this one had we been writing daily?
We would have had a huddle. I mean, and I'll be transparent. I mean, both, you and I have, varying relationships with some of the parties involved in this, and we're always cautious of that. Not that it makes us overly less cautious when it's otherwise, but that also gives us some opportunity in certain places to be like, hey, can you, comment, verify, thumbs up, thumbs down, any of that. Um, I think that this would have been a case where we probably would have covered it, laid out the reasons that you just said, and probably put it to the audience, but never substantiated it as anything more than rumor. That's my opinion. And you're absolutely right. Like when MC Search said that he was asked to write for Rakim, and I think he told Vlad TV that, you and I virtually kind of looked at each other and, I'm not so sure. But we put it out there. And even people like Pete Nice, Search's partner at third base, was like, no, fake news. But you have him saying it. That's happened a number of times where artists will say things that other people say otherwise. And who's to say? So, yeah, I mean, when there's a primary source, we give it. This one, we didn't cover rumor a ton, but I think this one, when you break it down the way that you did, because you said things about Dave's company that I didn't even realize, that his artist is Kendrick's cousin, it all needs to be stated. And then we would, of course, update it immediately when the Blues Clues video comes out.
Right, right. So the example you gave is perfect with MC Search, because the news for me would have been the fact that Search was saying what he was saying,
Mm-hmm.
not that it was true, right? So I wouldn't have pushed it to cite that as truth, but the fact that he is saying it in and of itself was a news event.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we would go back and forth.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of responsibility that goes with this, and I think that a lot of people don't take it seriously anymore. In fact, I think a lot of people are reckless and do
Yeah.
so just to get headlines and like kind of disregarding the truth. But I think you and I always strived for truth, but it was a balance.
We never treated Ambrosia for heads.com like it was a cash cow, because you can do that. You can get page views off of anything. You can squeeze blood out of a stone, but it does a lot of damage to this culture. And I always equate it to people that take copper out of buildings and then melt it down. Like, you can strip a lot of cultural integrity out of hip hop so that you hit a certain page view threshold and get a bonus or do whatever. And you and I left a lot of possibility and profile and I guess revenue on the table by what we didn't cover. And I'm proud of that,
Yeah. So, sticking with TDE and, covering something that is being said by the source itself, Reason put out an album, this on Friday called New Beginnings. And since then, he's even said in an interview I saw that this isn't really his debut album for TDE. This is, I guess, kind of like a collection of songs he had been working on for a couple of years. And it's finally getting its release. And if you think about his song, The Soul, which I think was your and my both our introduction to Reason, and which was like one of maybe my song of the year that year. I think it was like
Yeah.
2018.
Yeah.
He was, he starts off the song with Patience, New Beginnings Coming. Like, and it's just such it's just a subtle line, right? You just think it's like he's just saying new beginnings are coming, but that was actually a reference to this project,
Yeah.
so that lets you know kind of the timestamp on when he had anticipated it was coming. But on that album, which also features Rhapsody on song, and we put a couple songs on the playlist.
JID. Yeah.
JID. I think it's a really stellar project, or some stellar songs on it. And, given that he doesn't even consider it to be his album yet, like, I'm sure he's got some heat. He said he's got about 70% done. But one of the songs on the album is called Windows Cry. And it's truly a window into like Reason's like thought process and feelings at the time. And one of the verses focuses on his feelings about TDE and his situation that he was in. A lot of times artists, in general, but we've seen this happen on TDE too, kind of express kind of frustration at not getting their projects out. SZA has done it. I think Solo did. There've been times when artists have wanted to kind of get out and they haven't been able to. Reason has been vocal about it in the past too. And on the song, he says, he says you heard the stories of labels putting artists in danger, using them up, never pay them, and then replace them. And now you're stepping into unfamiliar situations of a label that's like family but adopted you for paper. And he says, they got you sitting on the bench. You're gonna lose your listens. You're gonna hurt your fans. You're gonna lose your mentions. He said you're trying to grow as big as Dot, trying to move your image. Now you got Dave pushing buttons, and he grew up with him. Dave Free, and he says, what's your motive? Can't never trust them. They make Ali mix your vocals without discussion. He says you got Top Son as one of your managers, and you barely even know him. If you and Top get into it, like who's he riding for? Like, I mean, those are real serious things he's saying. Is so, but but the thing is, for anyone who wants to try and make a controversy, like what a chess move it is, that the label let them put it out.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that shows right there that they are really about it, right? Like, listen, we are human beings. We got feelings. We have things that like irritate each other, and but we're gonna be men about it, and we're gonna disagree, and we're gonna resolve it, and we're gonna be transparent about it too. Listen, like, we're not trying to stifle you, and let the public know how you felt. So I thought it was a real ill power statement, at the end of the day. But what are your thoughts about it?
It was one of my, Windows Cry is one of the joints in the album. And, one of Reason of the last 3 years, only Toby Nwigwe is the artist that I'm most excited about. I kind of put Griselda, I mean, they've been around a bit longer, but Griselda puts out so much music. But with Reason especially, we didn't get it. I mean, he was part of the Dreamville, Revenge of the Dreamers 3. And even on that album too, to your point, him and I think Kaz had this concept song about robbing their bosses and kind of why they would do it, because they're frustrated that they're playing the bench. I love Reason that he's unfiltered. The Soul was so great because he talked about, fitting in with Crips and Bloods and, Musa, all these different figures. And he's just like he's talking to you. So that comes across in the song. And I love it because it's just creative control. And, we talked about Scarface, who had a very interesting dynamic with rap a lot over like 25 years. people forget Sean Price, you know, a revered guy in the underground. Sean would get on and just clown Drew Ha, you know, and just say, Drew, you owe me more money, or you said this in a meeting and I didn't like it. And, you know, Sean Price is the same artist that saved Duck Down. You know, Drew and Buckshot will tell you that. So I love it when you have an artist saying something real and raw, and like you said, being men or women about it. That's just cool. So whenever Reason does his full project, I just want that raw, uncut, like, tell me what's going on in your mind, because it's somehow so relatable to the rest of us.
Yeah, I love his chess moves and his forethought. You know, we talked about the Patience New Beginnings, which was a hint there. You mentioned the song on Dreamville, where you know he and Cos talk about setting up their label owners. But I don't know if you caught it, but in this Reason project, he goes back and basically says that he and Top are setting Cos up.
No, I didn't catch that. That's
yeah,
dope.
yeah. You know, so like he's constantly building and iterating on his stuff, man. I think he's special. You know, I said I saw Top a couple years ago, and it's the first time I met Reason, and I just told him how special I thought he was. Like his mixtape, the free mixtape, the free album, just like changed me, you know. And I've been a huge fan ever since. But like this album is cool. I need to give it more listens. It was one of the rare times where, you know, when I work out, I typically like to watch a TV show. But like it's Friday morning and it just come out and I just needed to listen to the album. So I listened to the album instead of watching TV. But yeah, I was excited about it. It was like Christmas for me, man. You know?
I think it's cool. You know, fans that follow Reason have heard 30 to 40% of this album before, for the reasons he said. It's why it's not his, you know, quote unquote debut. You know, and the music is really good. And both you and I, through the playlist, some of these songs go back to coverage on the site, videos, the joint with Absol, Flick It Up. You know, there's a lot of moments on here that and I like that artists are taking their Lucy's and their singles and letting them live somewhere, because I feel like just the way that music and albums living in the cloud work, it can be easy to forget. And, you know, another artist on Rhymesayers, Sarok, did that too, where, you know, AFH, we've been covering her for years, and she finally put out her first project that's with Rhymesayers, and she grabbed songs that were from 2018 and 2019 because they matter, they're important. So I like that we're combating the sneak attack album of boom, here's 12 songs, all new, you know, take apart what you will, and really pacing out artistry in a way that I feel like over the last couple of years got lost.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So salute to TDE, a big week for them. You know, so I think another reason why the rumor could have gained traction is because Kendrick has not put out his album yet. And, you know, I think that people make assumptions that if it's taken this long in this day where people are releasing things constantly, there must be something amiss. But what do you think I can think of a few reasons why, you know, Kendrick has not released his album yet, despite like all the rumors. One is he's just an artist, right? And he takes his time. He has specific concepts, and he's not going to let anything go until it's right. And that formula has worked pretty well for him so far. You know, the guy's Grammy nominations are insane. I think he's won something like 13 or, you know, some astronomical number like that. By now, he's had 2 albums in a row that were nominated for Album of the Year, just in all categories. Both won Best Rap Album. And three that were nominated. Like, so, you know, like anybody who's trying to like rush this process, like can just step aside, you know. Second thing is, if you think about what an album does now, an album is not just your statement, but it's also your platform that you can use to tour on, you know, and which is where artists make the vast majority of the revenue, going back to that discussion.
Merch and touring, and merch sold at touring.
Yeah, it's not even about the masters and the recording, because the labels do own the master recordings, and such a big chunk of that revenue goes to them. The artists rely mostly on their touring. And so any artist who releases an album now, yes, you can tour on it at some point, but, you know, who knows how long COVID is going to last, and, you know, it would maybe lose its relevancy. So it's an opportunity lost. So I can understand why an artist might send this project. But like, any other thoughts for you as to why?
Kendrick did that. I mean, Kendrick made the Sneak Attack album. I give Drake credit in this too, and but he made that a thing. Like, let's not forget that To Pimp a Butterfly came out a few days early on the Sneak.
Yeah.
He did both Damn and Untitled Unmastered on the Sneak, more or less. And so he's done that. And I think, I just keep having that lyric in my head from Section 80 of like, don't compare me to those, effing rappers, where Kendrick plays at his own level. And I feel like if we're living in a time where artists are being so prolific and putting 2, 3, 4 projects out a year and all of this, he's going to sit back and be King Kendrick, and when we get something, it's going to matter. And if he were to drop something right now at a mass level, it would get lost in the election. I hate to say that, but whereas if he takes aim and finds that spot that he's been so successful in with, like you said, all the last 3 albums, he has the chance to resonate through a year. And even Eminem had that power in the early 2000s, but here we are, 2020. I mean, Eminem dropped a Sneak Attack album earlier this year. No one's talking about it. Dre puts out Compton. It comes and it goes. Kendrick is the A1 guy, and I feel like he wants to keep that power, and he's being very smart about it. So I never worry. I never hold him because, and like we're saying with Sean and other people, he speaks through feature verses, and I do hope we get one of those soon.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I still think that TDE's got some more up his sleeve for the rest of the quarter. And I think the reason might be the opening salvo.
I bet we're going to hear from Isaiah Rashad at some point.
Yeah. A lot of swirl on him. He disappeared for quite a while, but some guest verses.
He's lingering on the horizon. Yeah.
Yeah, he got a verse in the Reason album. He's been popping back up. So yeah. So in other news, and this was a little while ago, but we took a break last week, but I think it's important to address is that with the BET Hip Hop Awards, the nominees were announced almost 2 weeks ago, and Royce da 5'9", who you and I both believe has one of the best albums of the year, and is doing the best work of his career, was not in any way recognized by any of the nominations. Now, I'll say, having obviously worked at BET for a number of years, that the Hip Hop Awards is one tailored more toward commercial artists. It definitely kind of skews toward that, and it also skews a bit younger. And I think you see that in the performances. Typically, where the more lyrical content is found is in the ciphers, and so, but lyricist of the year is also a category where a lot of times MCs are recognized who are just spitters,
Yeah.
And this year the nominees were Big Sean, DaBaby, Megan Thee Stallion, Rhapsody, J. Cole, and Drake. That would have easily been an opportunity for Royce. And certainly he, he fits in. He's an elite MC. Who would you have taken out of that, and why do you think he didn't make it?
Yeah, I'm upset. I'm upset for Royce. I was upset for Nas to appear on the Grammy stage this year with Lil Nas X, knowing that Nas has never won a Grammy. People use artists, it's like Jay said with the magazines, in the Blueprint era. You helped put Royce on BET so many times, and while you might not have final say in the nominees, Royce has, he was even standing beside Eminem when Benny and Gunn and they did that video in the Detroit parking garage. This is a giant snub, man. And for me to answer your question, I'm going to drop Meg. And not for nothing, Meg is a dope MC. I loved her SNL performance. I love the political impact of it. I think Savage is a great record. I love her NWA cover. But in the last year, Meg, as dope as she is, hasn't made that work that shows her as a supreme lyricist on par with these other names. So, I would take Meg out of the list and put Royce first, and I'd give him the damn award. And because, that album, The Allegory is my album of the year still. And I hate to see that not recognized. I hope the Grammys do better than BET with that one.
Well, let me ask you this, because we've talked about this guy having an unbelievable last 2 years too. Like, do you think Benny the Butcher was snubbed?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would absolutely consider Benny for that list, and that's when I start to look at Drake, and I'm like, Drake is an elite lyricist, but I don't know that you've had the impact of Benny just on the lyrical side over the last year. That could be debated. Royce, I'm 100% all in. Yeah, I do feel for Benny in a way, and hopefully, again, to bring it full circle, moves like Timeless with Wayne and Sean open some new eyeballs to the Butcher.
Yeah. Yeah, I think both those two deserve nods. They both had unbelievable years at the top of their game. When it comes to pure lyricism, like, they stand with anybody.
I'm happy to see
Yeah,
Rhapsody here, though. I know
yeah,
that
Rhapsody, of course,
the Grammys, I feel like,
her album. Yeah,
yeah, that was not fair. And I think Rhapsody, yeah, I'll tell you all day though, because I think a lot of people would see DaBaby and go, oh hell no. DaBaby earns that spot all day.
yeah. DaBaby's had an incredible year, man. He leads all nominees. I think he's got 12 nominations. Amazing year. Like rock star. He's got substantive songs. He's got like party starters. He's the real deal. I really really
Mm-hmm.
like him. So another young cat that we like a lot is Osmond Benjamin, and we talked about him being on that Locks. All things tied back to the Locks album.
Singing on the
Yeah,
Locks album.
and Royce had a comment about Rock Nation, like how many of the nominees
Word.
were affiliated with Rock Nation. He said that he was gonna like set up a cipher stand outside the next Rock Nation brunch and block the entry. Like,
Yeah.
so props to him for that. That was funny. But Osmond Benjamin, sang on the Locks album, which is amazing because he's a supreme lyricist. You didn't expect that. But there's a new movie out. It's on Netflix. I think it made a lot of noise at Sundance. Have you heard of it? The 40-year-old version.
Yeah.
Play on words. It's by a woman named Rada Blank, Black woman who's director and writer, and very reminiscent of Spike Lee. It's got some nods to Purple Rain in it, with some
Uh-huh.
scenes. Watched it last night. Very cool movie. But Osmond Benjamin is featured in the film pretty prominently. He
Oh wow.
plays um, a musical interest and more for her, and does a great job. Like, this kid is multi-talented, man. Guy Rute, Pharaoh Monch's manager and many other things, is actually the music supervisor, and
Oh wow.
the
Dope.
soundtrack the soundtrack is amazing. And you can see it's got Styles P is actually in the movie,
Okay.
and Mickey Fax, another
Got one of
Rute
Guy's clients.
person,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
is in the movie. A lot of like pretty cool appearances if you're into real lyrical hip hop. So yeah, definitely recommend checking it out, supporting Black film for sure.
Well, as we seg to new music, there's a joint on there that I didn't even realize because I haven't seen the film yet, but it's on certainly teed up for me. We've got Nas, Styles P, Remy, Dave East, and Ghostface on a song together called "The Mecca," produced by the Beat Miners.
No word.
It's not
This
on the DSPs yet. It's only on SoundCloud, and
Okay, okay,
Mass Appeal put it up. So shout
okay,
out to them. So it's
okay.
it's legit. And I'll tell you this, like, it sounds better on paper than what it actually is, but I love the fact that these guys
Okay.
are coming together, and I love that Evil D and Walt are finally producing, something with Nas and Ghost's voice on it, because
Yeah,
I think
you
that
said
might be a
Nas,
first.
Styles P, Dave East, and who else?
Remy Ma,
And Remy. Yeah.
and yeah, and then they credited the star of the film as well. I can't remember if she raps on the track or not. I only listened twice,
Oh yeah.
but yeah, man, Beat Miners on production too. So shout out to Guy if he had any hand in bringing that together as well.
Word. That's dope. And Westside Gunn came out with "Who Made the Sunshine." He says his major label debut on his Griselda Shady Interscope
Mm-hmm.
record. you know, I put a couple tracks. There's two tracks featuring Slick Rick,
Yep.
which is pretty amazing. You know, that's such a weird like combo, and the fact that Rick is on twice is wild. But
Yeah.
I thought that was dope. And one of the tracks features Rick and Busta Rhymes, and I thought Busta killed. I thought they both, but I thought Busta really killed that verse. But you
Yeah.
weren't impressed.
That wasn't my favorite. So first of all, Busta ELE2 is coming out October 30th. October is going to heat up. Global
Yeah.
warming, it's real.
Yeah.
But what I loved, it was the second Rick feature, Good Night, which I'm sure you caught as a reference to the End of Children's Story.
Yeah.
And it's a total storytelling track.
Yeah.
Raw as, you know, as hell. And that to hear Gunn and Rick together was crazy. I saw somebody on Twitter, I think we retweeted them, that they said that Slick Rick needs to sign a Griselda. I love that idea.
Right. Yeah,
You
that
know,
would be ill.
yeah.
That would be super ill.
And then the joint, my favorite joint on the album, though, real quick, is 98 Sabres, you know, referencing Buffalo's hockey club. And that's Just Blaze, scorches the beat. And he's got the whole crew on there, including Armani Caesar. And that joint is just, what a way to end an album. And let's not forget, the first time AFH covered Westside Gunn and Conway on their own was on a Just Blaze track when they announced signing to Shady. And that was back in March of 17, I believe. So
wow, that's crazy. Yeah. Time flies, man. Jay Live came out with the project. I had to check that out myself. You know, there was a time where Jay Live was my favorite MC, like back in, I think 2000, 2001. Like,
yeah, the best part era.
yeah, the best part, like just incredible, like incredible MC. And, you know, what else came out? Lupe Fiasco.
Put out a 2-pack with Soundtrack, who made some of the best beats on Food and Liquor. I'm going to tell folks right now, you know, it doesn't sound like that at all. These guys are experimenting, but I know they're up to more. So it was a little preview 2-pack. I mentioned Cyrock's project. Black Thought has a verse on there that's insane. I believe, yeah, it's called Black Renaissance, and he opens it up. And Cyrock just has such an ill voice. I'm a huge fan of hers. And her and Evidence have just taken Rhyme Sayers in a really cool direction right now.
Word.
So shout out to that. What else?
Lyric Jones, MOP.
And the Lyric Jones project, we talked about Fonte earlier. He's helping Lyric Jones put out her album. And he's executive producing. And he said that, like, even years ago when Justice League was putting out Median and Away Team and all those different offshoots, he said, look, I wasn't dedicated. I was just getting on myself. So he's really giving her a proper push, and she came out with a Vic Mensa assisted lead single called Show You How, which is really cool.
Yeah, Timbaland and Anderson .Paak, like it's a lot of great music came out this week, man.
You know what's been in heavy rotation for me is Smoke DZA's album, and we talk a lot about, you know, do artists get better over time? Something in the last 5 years, DZA is just on fire. Like, and I laugh because when I first heard him, like 15, 16 years ago, I was not a fan. And I've said that to DZA, and I said it to Johnny Shipes, who showed me his project. But man, I mean, what he's doing right now is great. And that you have it on the playlist, Santos Party House. That joint with Currency, Crit, and Wiz, like that just takes me back. And the beat, insane.
Yeah,
so.
That and like the joint deal with Pete Rock and Benny, like I mean, like just killing it.
Statute of Limitations, that was the joint.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
A lot of good music, man.
Yeah, man. So with that being said, what's your song of the week?
You mentioned Run DMC early in the podcast, man. I'm doing some stuff with Pete Rock right now, and I was going through his catalog, and I played Down with the King, and I loved Run DMC so much when I was like, 11, 12 years old. Those guys, the three of them, really helped me go all in on hip hop, and I listened to the early stuff a lot, but I forgot just how amazing that song is, and yesterday I ran the album back a few times too and just really enjoyed myself. So Down with the King, man. What about you?
Song with the youngsters on that album too.
Yeah.
It's pretty dope. I remember that. Yeah, man, we lost a great this week. An icon, Eddie Van Halen. We talk obviously about hip hop and giving the platform, but we're both fans of all sorts of music, and our songs of the day we sing each other like a very mixed. And so I'll go with Ain't Talking About Love. Eddie just kills the guitar like on that.
The intro to that.
Yeah, unbelievable. You know, I always think about like when David Lee Roth left, he was like, part of his gripe was that Eddie was playing keyboards, with on Jump
Interesting.
and 5150 on 1984 and 5150, he started moving the keyboards, so he started playing guitar, and he's like, oh man, play the guitar, man, you're a guitar hero. Like I could just hear Dave's voice saying that, and what a hero he was on that guitar, man. Read an article yesterday that he was half Indonesian, which I did not know, and endured terrible, terrible racism growing up in Holland and even in the U.S. So pretty transcendent life to achieve what he did. So shout out to Eddie Van Halen, rest in peace, to all his friends, family, and fans. So yeah, ain't talking about love, man.
Man, Van Halen with hip hop. I mean, even from Tone Loc, obviously, like the drum roll, but even we posted a photo on our Instagram of Eddie and LL Cool J in recent years sitting at the boards together. Like, that guy loved hip hop, and I feel like if there's no Van Halen, the first Beastie Boys album and some of those Run DMC, Rick Rubin projects just don't sound the same. So the impact is nuts, and that is my favorite Van Halen song.
Yeah, for sure. Yo, good chopping it up, man.
Likewise, until we meet again.
Yep, to be continued.
All right.
Later.